Well, Shabbat Shalom. So grateful to have Cantor Rudy and Rabbi Reuben to chant these verses and prayers for us in such magnificent ways. We are blessed beyond comprehension. So on this Shabbat, I am looking over to the right here in our home in Reseda and seeing on the coffee table what we have just concluded a couple of nights ago was a wonderful 1,000-piece puzzle. Jigsaw puzzles in this time have had a resurgence of popularity, and there are a few things really quite as satisfying and suspenseful, actually, as putting together a jigsaw puzzle. Even if you know what the picture is and are working at a reasonable clip, there's always that feeling of excitement and a little bit of anxiety as the pieces of the picture come together. During this surreal year, this puzzling and frightening and much too suspenseful year, puzzles have been one of the many ways that people have maintained a sense of control, of togetherness, of a sense of comfort that something that appears chaotic can be fitted together in a way that is satisfying and gives a sense of completion. As we come to the end of the book of Exodus, we didn't hear the actual verses of the end of the book because it is the special maftir where we read about the coming of Passover and the actual experience of that night in Egypt before the Exodus was completed. But as we get to the end of the book of Exodus, there is a sense of completion, a sense of what was haphazard and overly detailed, and a feeling of chaos and how will this all come together actually fitting into place as the final pieces of the tabernacle find their way together and Moses and the people finish the work. It was the theme of Jared's bar mitzvah 8 years ago when he was in his absolute Lego craze. He never has let go his love of Lego, but at age 13, that was absolutely where we were. And the theme of his bar mitzvah was one brick at a time, which is the Lego motto. It pervaded the feeling of his bar mitzvah. We had Lego chocolates and actual Legos on the tables that people built and played with. And the theme of his teaching was putting the pieces together. Well, let's face it, this has been a year of chaos in so many ways, of trying as best we can week after week to put the pieces together. And a story that appeared a year ago, almost exactly a year ago in the Los Angeles Times, fitted some more pieces of itself together just a week ago when a follow-up piece to a wonderful op-ed that appeared last year on April 15th, 2020, by Marian Ein Lewin. This was a piece written by this wonderful woman who worked for many years as the director of the Office of Health Policy Programs and Fellowships at the Institute of Medicine of the National Academies in Washington, D.C. Ooh, what a mouthful of a title, but a marvelous woman is Marian Lewin. She wrote an op-ed last year recalling how she and her twin brother, Stephen, were at the age of 6 years old, imprisoned with their parents at Bergen-Belsen. She wrote about celebrating Passover with a group of prisoners from Salonika, Greece, who managed to make a little bit of matzah, speaking to the strength of the human spirit in the face of death and the courage to maintain an ancient and hallowed Jewish tradition in a world of fear and terror. Marian spoke movingly about the memories she had being such a small child at Bergen-Belsen, the camp where Anne Frank and her sister Margot breathed their last. And Marion spoke of being in that unfathomable abyss and how their lives became about maintaining hope in a dystopian world, looking to the light in a world of darkness, remaining strong, remaining human, and thinking of others when staying alive was a full-time and mostly doomed effort. She spoke last year about fighting an enemy that none of us could see, not as ruthless as the Nazis, but truly, truly frightening. She wrote a year ago that our lives have been transformed, every day bringing new anxieties, new limitations, new fuel for feeling overwhelmed and helpless in a world that seems yet again to be falling apart. But at that time, a piece of Marion and Stephen's puzzle was still very much not in place, to the extent they didn't even know or dream. 1 year ago, in Marion's op-ed in the Times, there was also the publication of a picture that they had had in their possession for many, many decades. The picture ran with the op-ed, and a treasure hunt began. This picture of these adorable 6-year-old twins ran in the paper, and at that time, 1 year ago, a couple in Sunland, California, not far from us here in Reseda, Trudy and Doug Kramer-Fay, looked at this picture and couldn't believe their eyes. Doug, a retired geologist, and Trudy looked together and said, "Oh my gosh, these little children are in Urker costumes." Doug is U.S. born but has a Dutch branch in his family tree, and he and Trudy have gone many times to Holland with his wife. Her early childhood was spent in the Netherlands, and her grandparents were born and raised in a small fishing village called Urk, known for a particular kind of ornate costume that Stephen and Marion are wearing in this picture. They had always thought that was a typical Dutch costume, but it turns out it was just the beginning of pieces of their puzzle falling into place. Take a look at it for another moment. With more people involved than I will share this morning. It's a wonderful piece in last week's Times, March 7th, by a local treasure, Steve Lopez, an amazing columnist here in LA. Once that picture appeared and Trudy and Doug Fay saw it, they set in motion an international gathering of the greats, where people in the Netherlands contributed pieces of information to fill in the puzzle that is Marion and Stephen's life. It turned out that this picture was taken just before their family was arrested and sent on an unimaginable journey of horror and peril. But they were dressed in their costumes, as they came to learn in these last few months, by their nanny, Marietta Pasterkamp, whose name they perhaps never knew, or certainly in all these years, Stephen and Marion are now 83 years old, they had long ago forgotten. Marietta died in 1999, but through the internet and through phone calls and through some good old-fashioned detective work, her children were contacted, and they were able to share pieces of this puzzle that are truly touching. Marietta, Marion and Stephen's nanny, loved them dearly and dressed them in these costumes the last time that she would see them. In the chaos of that time, Marian and Stephen's parents gave Marietta a box of fine linens. They farmed out possessions to a number of people, hoping that perhaps they would be able to retrieve them after the war. Most of their possessions were gone, but Marietta held on to that box of precious linens. It was returned to Stephen and Marian's parents after the war. And though Marian grew up and still has in her possession some of those fine linens, she had never known until these last few months that their nanny Marietta had held that box throughout the war and took pains to have it returned to Stephen and Marian's parents after the war ended. What Marian also learned in this last many months was that Marietta named one of her 4 children Marian, in memory of the beautiful little girl that she had dressed in her town's costume. Marietta from this town of Urk was one of many young women who took the train more than an hour each way every day into Amsterdam, most of them to serve as domestic help for Jewish families. Marian Lewin was so overwhelmed to learn that her nanny, who she had long ago forgotten and had only very blurry memories of, had held her family so dear throughout the war and beyond. She cannot personally thank Marietta anymore, but this deepens her sense of the picture of her life as she and her brother Stephen continue to piece together lost bits of their past. Lewin said that even in the darkest moments behind barbed wire 70 years ago, there were those within the camps and obviously without, who risked punishment by caring for the sick and dying or helped find lost or stolen items to give to others. Again, it was all about maintaining hope in a dystopian world, looking to the light and remaining human. In this last year, there have been so many who have reminded us all that though we feel broken and fragmented, and the pictures of our lives are sometimes in absolute pieces, with far more gaping holes than clear pictures, there are always those people who know what it truly is to shape a legacy of love and light. We may not know their names. We may not know how they have been touched by us or how we are touched by them. But the story of Passover, the story of building the Mishkan, the story of piecing together the puzzle of our lives is a reminder that yes, indeed, life is a puzzle. And sometimes the only way to find our way to the picture that it will ultimately make and paint is to put together one piece at a time. Let's continue to build that puzzle together and find answers one little piece at a time. May we go from strength to strength, and thus doing, may we strengthen one another. Shabbat Shalom. An addendum to today's story. Stephen Hess said it was a major miracle that out of a small fishing village, and as the result of an article that crossed halfway around the world, I found out about so many missing parts of my history. For all of the missing parts of our history, those that we know and those whom we don't, we remember all of the good and beautiful people that have touched our lives and have left this world. Also from this story about Stephen and Marian was an additional piece that they discovered a few months ago. They learned the story of the photographer who took that remarkable picture of them at age 6. The photographer was named Leo Fisher. He was a member of the underground resistance in Amsterdam. He took photos for false identification documents that allowed Jews to escape the country. He was arrested 1 month after he took that wonderful photo of the little children. 1 day after his arrest, he and 17 other prisoners were executed at gunpoint. May the memory of the righteous be forever a blessing.